All right, welcome back to Mini Mastery. We're painting Dave the Dwarf, one of the adventurers in our campaign that's currently going on. Last time we worked on armor, today we're going to be working on leather. So just taking it in, he's got the boots and gloves and belt and that front almost, it's not quite a tabard, not a loincloth, but that decorative armor bit in the front. And then of course the handle on his sword will also make in leather. So this is just using what's just called a tanned leather from Reaper. Of course, this miniature is a Reaper metal mini, and just going through and carefully putting this down. This is going to give us the separation from the armor to the boots to make that blue on the pants pop out, as well as from the armor to the gloves that'll make the red-orange pop out. And speeding it up just so it goes by fast. We don't want you to sit through too long. And I realize we're out of focus on this quite a bit. I apologize about that. We'll definitely get better as we continue forward on that. But just putting down leather on all the leather bits. The belt is one of the more challenging pieces just because it goes around about, not quite 3/4, maybe about 3/4 of the miniature. And all of the leather bits are going to get the same base coat, and then we're going to actually wash them with different colors. But just being sure that we cover everything nice and evenly. We've got a good even coat with thin down paints, and getting all the edging and making sure our coverage is really, really good. And by utilizing this color, we're actually making sure all of the leather bits having that same base coat. We're just being a little frugal on paint, which is never bad, and keeping it all the same so that it doesn't detract too much or take too much away, because all of these minis, though we're doing a good paint job, definitely not commission or competition level, but a good paint job. We still want it to be able to be used on the tabletop if the player so wishes. So we don't want to have too much going on in that it's too distracting. We want it to flow really well when it's on the table. So all of the leather bits will have the same base coat, and then just a little bit of variations in the washes to show that there are different leather types. But the glove and the straps onto the shield here are a little bit challenging, and you can see I'm not being super clean, super neat with it. So some of the shield is getting some of that leather base coat, and that's fine. We're going to be painting over that. And of course, the pommel of this sword will also be getting, so I'm not too worried about being super clean. But I want good coverage on all of the leather bits. And I'm using a wet palette so that my paints, I've already laid them all out. I want them to stay wet, so I don't want them drying out and getting crusties on the mini. I want to be able to go back to them if I need to, because we will be going back after them a little bit once we put the wash on with this base color, just to bring it back up from kind of the shadowy base color that we put on. Leather can be a challenging piece to do. I've seen lots of tutorials. I've watched a lot of master painters on how they do leather. And because this is tabletop, I'm pretty much sticking to a triad process. So I'll do a base coat, and then I'll do a wash, and then highlight up from the base coat. But you can see all the leather bits now painted. Just making sure everything has a chance to dry before I start doing the washes. and everything is going to get the same wash color to start, and then a couple of the pieces are going to get another wash with a darker color. But before I start those washes, I'm going to go ahead and paint the back of that shield because I'm going to make it look like wood, and getting around the straps and the glove is going to be a little more challenging. So putting down the base color, this is a very dark brown that I'm using, and this is actually what's going to be used for the darkest wash on a couple of the pieces. But I just want to get this down so that as I'm doing the washes and then the highlights, I don't have to mess those up when I'm painting the details on the back of the shield. So I'm going to lay this down and just make sure I've got really good coverage in all the crevices, and I'm able to go back to it and just work on the details of that separately from the glove when we go to work on some of the detail work. But just wanting to make sure that the base coat is down, and that way as I work on the glove and the straps, I won't have to redo those by doing the back of the shield. So just separating those out a little bit, and you can see all those leather bits there. Here I'm putting on the wash, so this is that medium brown, and I just put it on very liberally. I want this to go in and sit in all the low spots and crevices. Everything that's leather is going to get this wash. So both gloves, the straps. Again, I'm not worried about the back of the shield because I've got that base coat on. The boots, these have a little bit of a decorative front to match the front on the belt, loin area. Then of course the soles call out or are sculpted in, so I want to be able to show those really well with the washes. So just making sure the wash settles in everywhere. This paint is probably 100-to-1 ratio of paint to water, and that's my blend. And then onto the belt. Again, a couple of these pieces are going to get another wash as well, but we're going to start with all of them getting the same wash, and just allowing that to get in every crevice that we can. And then this is always the hard part, is waiting for everything to dry, but you can see the wash has started to call out those details like on that front belt decoration really, really well. The mini itself is definitely getting some good details. The shadows are sinking in, and that initial leather look is coming along really well. The leathers currently are all the same, and they don't look bad, but we want to differentiate them a little bit. So at this point, what we want to do is really highlight a couple of areas that are a different leather. And to do that, I'm using a little bit different, darker brown, and this is a red-brown color. I want to utilize this on just a couple of pieces, including the handle of the sword and the belt proper. And that front tabard piece, like the shield, has a lot of the same decorations. We're not going to be able to get to them this session, but we will tie it into the shield and have a good, fun piece that the player himself is going to recognize, and it's going to really be a cool call out to the player through his mini. But for Dave the Dwarf, again, because he is that utilitarian type of dwarf, we're going to make the belt and the handle be a little bit more rigid. So utilizing a darker brown color and just putting in that second wash. So this is on top of the first wash with a darker brown wash, a red-brown wash. And this will really drive those in to look like they're harder leathers. And a little juggling there with that shield, it is a little bit challenging to get to. But that's okay, we'll get in there. And on the thumb, you can see a little bit of the variance in the colors that we've used so far, how dark this one is comparatively to that medium brown. Now this color just kind of floats into the lowest areas, just like on the gloves and everything else, but on the belt we want to focus that center, because belts and pouches and every type of leather gets more wear on the edges and less kind of on the center piece. With the sword, it should follow the same path. Where the handle is gripped will be a little bit lighter, but I'm changing that up a little bit just to have more separation from the glove to the hilt or to the handle. But after that dries, then we're going to start highlighting. This is back to our straight leather brown, and we're just retouching the higher areas, the worn areas, so edges. And this looks very contrasted to the previous, but again, as this thin layer dries, it'll be a little less opaque and blend in really well. The toes, think about as a figure is walking, moving, that leather's bending and wearing. Where are those wear areas? And one thing you can always do is just grab your pair of work boots and look and see on your boots, where do they wear the most? Just emulate that with this leather color. You know, Dave has been a soldier in his background, so he hasn't spent as much time underground like other dwarves. So I wanted to put quite a bit of wearing on the soles and the boots, just to show the kind of environment the character has been dealing with. I'm not going to make him dusty. I'm going to make him look like he's had to do lots of marching, so quite a bit of wear. And then also with the gloves, because he has been a soldier, he's been using weapons and shields, so I wanted to wear those pretty decent. And then the decorative piece, I'm not going to wear as much. But I want this to be one of those call-outs that's not really apparent, but shows if you know the character's backstory and background. You'll see those kind of pieces that make sense to the miniature based on the character that the player created and the insight and input and choices he made in the character development stage. And again, if you just grab your pair of work gloves, whether they're garden gloves, if they're leather, you'll see over time how they wear on the knuckles and the bits of the palm. And you can even Google just work gloves and see the wear pattern so that you can make it look pretty realistic. But this leather is going to blend in quite a bit with that lower shaded or tinted leather from the wash, but be lighter in tone so that you can see the wear pattern. And again, these pieces here are pretty small. This is just for tabletop, not for competition. So it does not need to be perfect, and just done well enough to pay homage to the character and present the player with a miniature that they're happy with and really inspired by. Again, just because it's one of the things that I like, a good quality paint job on tabletop miniatures. So a little bit more than many tabletop minis get, but less than a competition mini would get. These leather paints from the Reaper, I really like. Again, they're really well toned and they blend up really well with different types of browns for shading, and then with khaki for the more wear pattern. Depending on the type of leather that you're going for, again, this is like a doeskin leather. There are different colors that I use if I'm using more like dyed red leathers or dark leathers. Anything that is more like elk leathers, where it's more of a white color, this is really just like a deer skin doe leather. Working on the highlights here on this decorative belt piece. And a lot of this follows the decorations on the shield. And as I'm painting here, thinking about Dave, my thoughts are that he would have had this crafted at about the same time. So same type of feature callouts and decorations from the same armorer who would work on some of the metal as well as some of the leather, or in conjunction with a leather worker. So the stamped leather. I initially thought about making this metal as well, laying on a leather or a cloth background, but I really like the thoughts of combining that leather and metal armor. And I can really see a dwarf appreciating the craftsmanship of a leather worker and a metal worker combining together to create a very decorative but ultra usable set of armor that highlights the player's choice on a dwarf fighter character. And Dave himself, while not being overly ambiguous about choosing armor that's super decorative, he's not going to choose anything that's over the top. The character himself definitely likes knowing quality, and having good quality arms and armor are definitely important to Dave. So I really think he would appreciate the bits of detail tied into the armor and making it a holistic set of armor tied in with his shield. So really the mini selected even before we started to play is really coming along as I envision Dave. So I hope the player kind of feels the same way once he receives it. But overall coming along really good. I like the amounts of details that the sculpt has, and kind of how the story progression is going for what I'm picking up from Dave the Dwarf, who at our last game actually I was really surprised. There were some challenges that the party faced with some ghouls, and I thought for sure they were going to be in a little bit more of a pickle than they were, because of the setup of the area they were in. I know they weren't able to get as much tactical advantage as they have in the past in some of the more open areas, but Dave really didn't even hesitate. He had a couple of opportunities or targets that he could choose from. He really stuck with his guns and committed, which I envisioned Dave as a dwarf doing, and thought, if I'm here, I'm going to be blocking and protecting everybody. I'm going to stick where I'm at and kind of do my wailing on this target. So very Dave-esque. I was very impressed. And utilizing his skills and the feats that he has as a fighter just definitely really paid off for the opportunity of him defeating a foe in a round. It was really good. Definitely, again, paying attention to how those kind of activities impact the character. I try to tie in as much as I can onto the mini. So that kind of straightforwardness really plays into the mini himself. And you can see it's just a fighter, a dwarf fighter, who is ready to get up and take things on. That's where we're going to stop today. Hope you enjoyed. We'll pick it up next week. Thanks for watching our video. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to hit the subscribe button to help us grow. And here's another video that we feel you might enjoy. Until next time, help us answer the question of where will your adventures take you?